it's not easy for anyone out there. So like if you're fishing right now and you're getting discouraged, like fishing is going to pick up. Like right now is the toughest time of the year in my opinion.
And I think a lot of it has to do with like the varying. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Hook One Pod. Hey, we're here back in the studio. Hope you guys enjoyed the holiday break. We've got a great episode planned for you today. Captain Joe's with us. What's up, Joe?
What's up? Happy to be here.
And we've got a good program scheduled for you guys today. We're going to talk a little bit how the summer fishing was. Joe spent a ton of days. How many days?
I had 115 days in before September. And that's not including the ones I didn't get paid for. So
right,
a lot of days out there.
So a lot of days out on the lake. For those of you guys that want to fish the lake more and understand the lake more, this is going to be a really good episode for you guys. We're going to touch on a lot of that stuff. Not give you any of the secrets, obviously, but go into how you guys can catch more fish and break that stuff down. And then we're going to kind of talk about what this fall is going to look like. So any of you guys that are ramping up, you can put your shotguns and decoys away, put your bows away, because we're fishing this fall. Probably not going to happen, but I'm going to try.
I'm definitely going to be spending more time on the water. It's going to be hard to drive 2.5 hours one way to hunt when I've got a little baby at home now. So
yeah,
we spend a lot more time out on the lake. That's about approximately 1.5 minutes away.
Yeah, exactly. Jordan's what, 6 months now?
He's 8 months.
8 months. 8 months. That's right. It comes upon a year. It's 1 year at the fishing show.
That's right.
So he's got an 8-month-old. I've got a 6-week-old. If we say anything wrong in this podcast, it's because we're sleep deprived, and I'm sticking to it. But no, we've got a good episode planned. I think the fall is going to be really good. I'm excited to touch on that. I'm not going to be the one spending money to get across the ferry and go play duck bingo. I don't have any interest in that anymore. So fishing's kind of what it's going to be. Before we dive into the podcast, we're going to hit the business end of this thing first, you guys. We're going to thank, obviously, all the people that have made this possible for us, especially this time around with the podcast. It's been super cool. Cortland Line, Papa's Pilar Rum, Whitewater Fish, and Great Lakes Angler Co. Again, if you guys want to save some money on any of those guys that really help us out here, they help do our giveaways. They help provide us with people to talk to and all that sort of fun stuff. You can find the discount codes right here. Use those. The Whitewater one's pretty crazy. You guys can head over and save 25% off the entire website. So I definitely suggest checking that stuff out. As soon as we get into the podcast, I haven't tried the blonde rum from Papa's yet. Joe's got to work in the morning, so told him we wouldn't get carried away. All I got to do is scoop minnows tomorrow, so I'm going to be drinking some of this blonde rum. I'll let you guys know how it is. But with all that being said, let's dive right into this, man. How was the summer for you? And I guess as far as summer goes, we'll start in like that June time frame. It's post-spawn. Those fish are getting ready to start going on the move. June's typically a really good time to bend some rods. So, like, what was the summer like for you? Did you notice anything different with the goofy winter that we had, or what were you seeing?
So the springtime kind of happened a little bit faster than it normally does for me anyways. And they just kind of started spawning a little bit quicker than normal. Usually we don't really see them spawning until we get into May, but this year there were definitely fish on beds in April, and it was just everything happened a lot faster. We actually had mayflies in May this year, which is crazy.
That was crazy.
Yeah, usually we don't see mayflies out there until June, and it just everything kind of accelerated a little bit quicker. So usually we're still catching fish on beds in June, and a lot of the times you can't necessarily see them, and they're out a little bit deeper, but they are in fact still spawning. But this year, a lot of post spawners, a lot of topwater mornings, just kind of depending on the weather. If we had a calm morning and those flies were hatching, it was really good, especially when those fish were post spawn and still up shallow.
Yeah.
We don't get that a lot where the post spawn and the mayfly hatch intersect.
And when you get those like big mayfly hatches, for you guys that spend time out on the lake in the summer, and you see like those big mats of mayflies and stuff. Is that kind of like your favorite time to target them top water?
So I actually don't like the mats. I like just individual bugs as they're hatching out of the bottom of the lake.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. This year I actually got on the first hatch I've ever seen during the day. And we were in like 3 foot of water, and I could actually see the bugs coming up off the bottom of the lake on live scope. And
really? Because we were I remember we talked like that day about it, and you're like, it was one of the craziest things I've seen. Like watching them literally come up off the bottom and then just there they go.
Yep. And I had a guy that brought his fly rod out that day, and he definitely took advantage of that.
What a day to bring a front to. There's that sleep thing. Yeah. What a day to bring a fly rod, dude. Because I mean, me personally, if I get someone that calls and they want to do like a fly fishing trip, I get like instantly intimidated. For some reason, I just get like, I don't know. I don't know if I got enough space for you. I don't know. If a guy knows what he's doing, it's one thing. But did he have to convince you at all? Like, come on, let me bring it.
I'm at the point now where like, if you want to try something, have at it. If you're going to bring your own stuff, you can bring whatever you want. There's plenty of room in the boat. So just throw you on the back deck or the front deck. Just don't hit my big motor. Don't hit my trolling motor is all I ask. But, I mean, if you want to try something, have it.
Was he throwing a top water, like a dry fly, or was he throwing something that was sinking?
No, he was throwing some sinker, fly, hopper, dropper, popper, lopper, or something like that.
That sinking line.
Yeah, shooter McGavin line.
Yeah, like shameless plug. Cortland line has some great fly fishing line for.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I tried fly fishing once up in the streams in northern Michigan. I spent more time getting that fly out of the branches. I got a couple brook trout to bite, which was really cool. But I spent a lot of time because they're so narrow.
Yeah, that's just not my thing.
But after we're after that mayfly hatch now. What do those fish do, dude? Do they just start roaming? I mean, spending 115 days out on the water looking at live scope. That gosh darn live scope. I promise, guys, this won't be a live scope episode. There's enough people making money off that talking debate. We'll take a different route.
Why can't we make some money too? No,
we're trying to get relevant. We're not trying to stay relevant. Yeah, so, and if you just throw the live scope on your boat, it'll just cash a check because the other 150 guys on the Elite Tour didn't have it on there, right? So it's like, and then I see people are like, and this is what I actually want to roll this into is like, I see a lot of people talking like, you need to learn fish movements and fish behavior. What better way to learn fish behavior?
I mean, it's crazy. Like, you literally can watch the fish do what they're doing.
Yeah.
You can watch the fish be fish, and you cannot do that by staring at the water and looking at your reflection.
You watch them react to bait balls. You watch them react to the bugs hatching off the bottom. You watch them react directly to your bait. You throw a bait down there and a fish swims away. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. You switch up your bait, throw it out on them, and they crush it. It's like, oh.
And a lot of times that doesn't happen either. A lot of times if they're in a negative mood, and they are not going to bite. So, and this is strictly like bass too. Like, I don't know. I can't talk about the muskies or anything. I know that's a sensitive subject, but with the bass, like when the bass aren't biting, they're not biting. Like, I don't care what you throw at them, you're not going to get them to bite for the most part. I mean, during the spawn, that's different. That's a completely other can of worms. But after the spawn, post-spawn, summer pattern, there's definite bite windows. And if you're outside that bite window, like, you can kind of trick them every once in a while, but you're not going to be able to follow a single fish around until it bites.
We've talked about that quite a few times on here, and I always make the joke, like, Allie refuses to stand at the bow of the boat or have live scope on the back screen because she's like, I don't want to see it. Like, I don't want to see all these fish. Walleyes are the same way that when they're negative, which we ran into a lot this spring, like, for a while, I thought it was just me. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what happened, but I lost it. And just hearing other customers come in the store and hearing a few of the other guides that were out there, it's like these fish are just negative. And you watch them on live scope, you could throw white, blue, purple, green, jigging wraps, jigging a crawler, plastics, like whatever. And they're negative. They're not going to bite. There's nothing you're going to do on your boat. You could put that sound wave thing on your trolling motor and you ain't going to make them bite. It's just not going to happen.
Right. And then just like as soon as it's time for them to bite, you can see how they set up in the water column changes. And like something has changed. These fish don't look like they did 15 minutes ago. and then they start biting, and you're like, okay, so I need to. And there's different fish in the lake. Like there's fish that are set up on current, there's fish that are set up on weeds, there's fish that are set up on rocks. And that bite window for different groups of fish is going to be different. So like you can see how one group of fish is set up on that structure, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they stop biting, after they get done biting and they go back down to the structure, you can run a different set of structure. And if those fish are set up the right way, you can get those ones to bite. But it's different. Like if they're on different, especially around current, I feel like it's a lot easier to get a fish to bite when they're negative around current than it is in the slack water in the middle of the lake.
100%.
Just because they're a little bit more opportunistic feeders when there's current around, and they're not working really hard. They're just kind of sitting behind a current break, waiting for something to float to them.
And that's when like wind direction and stuff makes a big difference, because depending on which way the wind is blowing is going to blow that current. Like we ran into that in the river, where we're fishing the river and we get a strong south wind that starts to blow back up against the current. There's certain spots where those fish are sitting, and a majority of them really, they'll just go neutral. It's really similar to like tides in the salt water, but those fish want it moving. Like when we see a north wind, a lot of guys get intimidated because the boat's moving so fast, but a lot of times those are your best days to get your bites. Those fish are hyper aggressive.
There's more and more food flowing down to them faster, and it just kind of gets them aggressive, and they are ready to ambush. They're ready. They're waiting for your bait. But exactly like you said, when that wind backs up the current, it's the same thing as down south on your power plant lakes, like the Tennessee River. If they're not pulling current, those fish are very hard to get to bite.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they start pulling current, they just set up right and they get ready and they're ready to eat. And that's when you want to catch them.
Yeah, 100%. Now, have you noticed? What up? Hang on, the camera's right there. We'll be out in a minute. Have you noticed? We almost had a disaster. Have you noticed that where those fish are sitting, whether they're on weeds or they're on those rock structures or in their current breaks, different baits are going to trigger different bites? Because do you notice their diet, I guess, changing depending where they're sitting? I mean, they're always moving, but
I think the conditions play more of a factor to that. If it's windy, then I'm going to throw something that's moving more often than not. If it's calm and stagnant, then I'm going to be more finessey and a lot less aggressive, and I'm going to throw a drop shot or a Ned rig or something. And I'm even going to downsize my bait to a smaller bait just to be less intrusive.
Yeah.
And kind of sneak in there almost. And then those fish are like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Right.
And as opposed to when it's windy and those fish are really looking for something. And if the water's broken up too, the surface, I want something big so those fish can see it and kind of react to it a little bit more than they would. And when it's calm.
Yeah, and a lot of those days too, when it's windy, you can actually set up a drift better, where you can throw a lot of the crankbaits or your spy baits or whatever to get down, create that movement, but fish them a lot faster. Where when it's calmer, you do have to focus a lot more on the finesse, and a few like we said, a few factors play into that, whether it be the current and the way the water's moving, or the ripples up on the top breaking up that light going down. Have you noticed that there's a certain time in the summer that's better to use more of a bug or a worm style bait as opposed to a minnow or fluke style bait?
Not necessarily. During the mayfly hatch, I like a lot of bugs. But I've been fishing kind of the bugs all year this year, and the only time I really think one technique or one shape of bait really kind of shines when it doesn't at other times is during a full moon. I think they eat a lot of crawfish during a full moon. So that's when I'll go to more of a craw style bait. And,
right.
But if there's a waning crescent, I'm not going to be throwing it. I'll throw a minnow style. But for whatever reason, those 2 days around a full moon, they get on those crawfish. And
I wondered if it has something to do with the crawfish activity.
I think so.
With the craws are moving more, so they're easier to kind of target.
I also think the craws move at night most of the summer.
Yeah.
And during that full moon, those smallmouth can see better, and they go out and eat at night. And then the first thing in the morning, right before dark, those low light hours, that's when they really eat those baits. Pretty good. So it's just kind of something that I've
So the
noticed
bite's
over
still
the
good,
years.
even on a full moon, the bite typically is still good. They don't.
Yeah, usually mid morning's kind of slow. Like that first hour or
Yes.
two of daylight is really good, and then I think those fish just go kind of stagnant, belly to the bottom,
Yep.
and are kind of digesting their morning breakfast, kind of taking a little nap if you want, and then after they kind of digest their food, then they get back up and they're ready to eat a minnow for lunch. So
Yeah.
usually around like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, they start biting again, and you can pretty much take it to the bank. Like after you fish a couple days in a row, you can kind of time it out pretty good, and it really kind of determines like where I fish that time of year. So if I know like these fish kind of like one of my good spots, I caught them in the morning, and I'm not going to be sitting on my good spots like midday. I'm going to kind of go out and explore and look for new stuff, or go to like a current spot or something like that. And then I'm going to come back to one of my good spots around like 1 o'clock and kind of go after it again there. But,
Yeah, that's great advice, because a lot of guys, like, I know a lot of times that depending with their work schedule and what's going on, you might not have all day to sit out there. But I know a lot of guys also, the days that they have all day off, they'll go spend out there fishing. And it's like, I try and explain to them, like, don't get discouraged. Don't, just because the bite like slows down, or just because the bite might not be super hot, like first thing in the morning, don't get discouraged. Like the bite windows are going to turn. Like that's one thing that I learned, big time this year, especially spending more time out in the river. And it tends more to walleye, because that's what we're doing is walleye jigging. But that they were eating so hard overnight. I mean, that's what walleye do. And they were feeding so much at night that first light bite was not very good. Like you could get out there 5:30, 6. That early morning bite was good right as the sun was coming up. But then that first light bite, that usually as soon as that sun starts to crest, and you're like, man, this is usually really good, and it stays good until 9:30, 10 o'clock. It was the opposite, where I'd go to a lot of community holes to start the day, just to pick away at some where we knew like there were more fish. And then we had an insane bite that would start, and it'd go from 10 till noon. It would start like mid morning and go till the end of our trip. And that's something that, a lot of guys have already put their boats on the trailer. They're already gone. And I think some of it has to do with a little bit less pressure because them guys are gone. But a lot of it has to do with the bite window. They've already ate overnight, like you said. They're just down there hanging out, digesting. I'm watching it on live scope. There's nothing you can do that's going to draw that fish to your bait and make it want to eat. I mean, the only thing you can do is drive a stinger hook in its belly. And I don't suggest keeping those.
No, I wouldn't do that. And you don't want to like pressure them too hard too when they're negative, because then you're going to screw it up for when they do start biting. They're not going to bite as good as they would if they weren't pressured when they were negative.
100%.
So like you don't want to really be in that area until especially if they're not going to bite. Like you don't really want to go to where those fish are. I mean, personally, like
you don't want to sit in a deer stand on a bad wind.
Right, exactly. I mean,
you don't want to let them know you're there. You don't want to even let them know that there's going to be baits going in front of their face,
Yeah, and it's all time of year too. Like that's the summer, and like those fish they have to eat. Their metabolism is at like the peak. Like they're they're cold blooded, so when the water's warmer, they eat more, they digest it faster, they burn more calories.
Yep.
As soon as that water, like what we're going through right now, starts to drop, now they don't have to eat twice a day or 3 times a day. Now they might not even eat at all for a day, and they're going to start their transition from their summer to their fall stuff. So like right now is like it's not easy for anyone out there. So like if you're fishing right now and you're getting discouraged, like fishing is going to pick up. Like right now is the toughest time of the year in my opinion.
And I think a lot of it has to do with like the varying, like right now we're in a time of year where the weather and the temperature is not very predictable. Like we've been in kind of a messed up weather cycle for the last couple years, but like right now specifically, and again for you walleye guys, like when we had those cold fronts like Labor Day weekend, and then we had that cold front this past weekend, those fish started chewing for 2 days. They'd start eating because they were starting to feel the difference, the pressure difference. We got a lot of north wind, which picked that current up. Some would say too much north wind.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Joe's out there in 5-footers in Lake Huron.
They weren't 5-footers, buddy. They're like 8s and 10s. I swear Dude, they're the biggest waves I've ever seen in my life. Like,
well, they have time to roll. In Lake Huron, they got time to roll.
They're big. That was the wettest day I've ever had on the lake, and it was absolutely brutal. Like northwest wind at 30 miles an hour. I do not know how we didn't have a small craft advisory on Lake St. Clair, but for some reason we didn't. I don't know if NOAA just took a vacation day and didn't feel like working on Saturday or what.
They took that whole week off from Labor Day on.
Yeah, they're good.
But yeah, and I noticed that like when that temperature started to change, they started to bite, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, it's hot, it's humid, the pressure is where it's at now, and it's like those fish just all of a sudden, you're catching limits on Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, you were lucky to get 2 or 3 in the boat. And it's like, we're in that transition right now. There's just a lot going on. So if you're out there catching fish, that's a good thing. Yeah. It is tough. There's tough times of the year like anything, but it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and if you look at your calendar too, like the first day of fall is not until September 22nd. Mm-hmm. So like as soon as you hit Labor Day, it's not fall yet. Like we are not in the fall. We're still in summer, and it's still 80 degrees. But we are seeing some of those cold fronts starting to come through, and it kind of makes the fish not really know what to do.
Right.
Yet. But once we get into fall, once we get a little bit more stable, like cooler weather, consistent, especially if the pressure normalizes, and then we get down there in the 50s, water temp. Like I saw 64 to 66 today.
Yes.
And I mean, that's warm. Like,
yeah. And we want it sub 60.
Yeah, especially like the lower 50s is probably the best time of fall fishing, in my opinion. Once you get into the 40s, it slows down a little bit more, especially bass. Walleye's different. Walleyes, once it gets below 55, it's game on.
Walleye and
all the way up until.
And that's just because, and that's just it. Walleyes will stay good all the way until ice up, and then as soon as you can get out, to 11 foot of water on the ice, you'll catch them out there. So like it's a totally different scenario, and the bass just disappear.
Yeah, they go dormant.
Yep.
There was a pretty viral video that went around a couple of years ago of about 500 smallmouth sitting on one rock, and all their bellies were touching the bottom.
That's crazy,
and
dude.
They do that. They don't hang in the wintertime with the walleyes. They're like they'd rather watch football and sit on the bottom.
I don't blame them.
Chips, but
dress warm, get some big fat bellies, and lay low. Because even like when we're out trolling them, or when we're out trolling walleyes, you'll catch like a smallmouth here and there, but it's just they definitely shut down. And one thing I want to touch on, what have you noticed? And we're going to dig into some of the factors that lead to this. But have you noticed a difference, or what have you noticed this year in like the size of the fish?
It's definitely down for me. The walleyes are up.
Yes.
And the smallmouth are down, in my opinion. And I don't know 100%. Like
I think we know. I think we have a pretty good idea what it is.
It's tournaments, man. There's so many tournaments, and it's
you got 3 tournaments launching out of the same boat launch, and that's something that we've talked about. And unfortunately, I don't think that DNR. I don't think we're going to do anything about it because
I don't want to shit on the DNR.
No.
I'm so sick of their excuses of, well, this is how we've always done it. That absolutely.
But we've never had 4 tournaments go out of Harley on a Saturday and then another 3 go out on a Sunday. And that's, you're not going to make the money from the out-of-state guys coming in, which I don't even know how many out-of-state guys come in to fish these tournaments that aren't the major tournaments.
I mean, the Indiana, all their bass clubs, they do their classics up here. So they'll have 25 boats, and they fry them up after the weigh-in so that they can have something to eat in the parking lot. It's just absolutely bonkers, man. Like, I would really like to see the DNR put a limit and
charge some money for it. So the money that you're going to lose on the anglers, if somebody wants to pull a permit, I mean, if a Bassmaster wants to come here, whether it's the Open or the Elite, the Elites are coming back next year in August.
You know what's crazy? We pay Bassmaster to come here.
Yeah,
that's complete bogus.
And it just stinks because like for the Open. And again, I'm not trying to shit on tournaments. I'm not trying to shit on the DNR. We're not trying to, but it's just one thing that like I think we've both noticed. But when you have an Open, that catches 2,200. Yeah, you heard that right. 2,200 fish in a 3-day span. A lot of those fish are from 4.5 to 5 pounds because they're weighing 25-pound bags. So let's just do the math here, right? You get 5 fish and you're weighing 25 pounds. And then you've got your co-anglers catching 3 fish. And the other thing is, I think we could do a little bit better job of how and where we're releasing these. Like, you can tell us that you're taking them out to the middle of the lake to release them, but we know, and the guys that are in this industry and that fish all the time, the middle of the lake, they're still releasing them in 6 foot of water, 8 foot of water. There's no oxygen there. The water's super warm. I just think it's a tough scene. And so I was just wondering, the open really, when at that final day of weigh-in, he's like, we weighed 2,200 bass. I was like, what is the size of the fish right now? Because all those big fish got plucked.
Yeah. And there was another big tournament right after the Open, too, the Tackle Warehouse Invitational that went on to Elizabeth Park.
Yes.
So all of the fish that came, like there was a few guys that fished Erie, don't get me wrong, but there was still 150 guys that fished St. Clair.
Yeah.
All of those fish were taken back to Lake Erie, essentially.
And it really is amazing. Like, if you go out there, like, when we went out there this year for that weekend, that was the NFL draft, the end of April. I mean, you pull up to, like, any of the spot. I almost said, I mean, it doesn't matter, but you pull up to any of those spots over there along the mile roads or the shores or wherever, and there's 300 boats pounding these fish off of beds, and you see the hook marks in their jaw, and you can see the infections on some of these fish, and you can tell that they're skinny and they just don't look right. You can see that they're not acting right. That is kind of worrisome.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, there's no gobies left in the lake. Like, there's no gobies left in Lake St. Clair. I don't care who you are and what you think, like what you saw on the internet. There's hardly any gobies left in Lake St. Clair.
If they are, they're this
tiny.
big. If they are, they're this big. When's the last time you've seen a smallmouth? And I don't even want to know how many smallmouths have come topside. When's the last time you've seen a smallmouth spit up a 3.5+ inch goby?
I did this year in the river. So the rivers still have gobies. The St. Clair River.
A lot more structure for them to
Lake
hide.
Huron, Lake Erie, Detroit River, Lake Ontario, the St. Lawrence River. All of those places still have gobies. And I also think, like, a lot of people say, oh, I saw them puking up crawfish. I don't think they digest the crawfish very well. So I think
I don't know how you could.
Right. So I think that's why they puke up the crawfish a lot. And that's why you don't necessarily see them puking up the gobies, because it's like there's no bones in the gobies. They're super soft. They're like a bite-sized miniature Snickers bar. Like, if you eat one of those, you can go run like 100 yards and you're not going to puke it up.
No.
But if you like eat a Little Caesars pizza and like the big crawfish, and then you go run 100 yards, you're hurt.
Especially if that Little Caesars pizza had a hard skeleton on the outside of it.
And like, you're not going to digest that very well. It's like if you ate the box with the pizza too. Like,
I think we're going to see a transition, and it's easy for me to say. And it's like, part of me wants to see all these guys come and fish because obviously, like,
we both
I want
to see them.
Yeah, you want people to come up and pay you to take them out fishing, because then they'll go out, like, then they'll have an idea of what's going on. So it's like, we do want them to come up and fish, but at some point we need to take responsibility as anglers. Like, hey, we do have a world-class resource right now. Yeah. Like, we're watching the same thing happen sturgeon fishing right now. And, like, I'm not going to get into it because, honestly, it gets me a little frustrated. But, like,
I've never seen so many posts of people fishing for sturgeon.
I've never seen so many posts. I've never seen so many boats. I've never seen so many boats, dude. They're on a 3-mile stretch of river. I'm gonna stop because I get worked up about it. Because again, we have a world-class fishery, and I do trust the biology. I mean, we are where we're at for a reason. So I trust the biologists. I trust what's going on. But I've got a hard time believing. I mean, the amount of guys that have been sturgeon fishing in the last 5 years has quintupled. Yeah, quintupled. I don't even know what quintuple is, but it's a lot.
When they're still using trot lines to do surveys for sturgeon, that's where I don't trust the people that are in charge. Like, you're using an archaic method that's been around for 150 years. Like, come on, get with the freaking program, dude. Like, that's bold.
And it's scary,
it's the
man.
way we've always done it.
Right. And it's like, we're in times that are not like the way it's been. Like, There are more people fishing. There is way better technology. There is way better baits. There is way better, like everything right now is better, which is good, but we want to keep it that way. And so it'll be interesting to see it kind of change. I mean, you're going to experience, as far as the bass fishing goes, you're going to experience it firsthand. I mean, it is interesting. I don't see, and maybe it's just because I don't follow it as much. That's kind of like my recreational thing is doing that. But like with the walleye, like we know what's going on in Lake Erie. We know what's going on in Saginaw Bay. There's a billion walleye being birthed up there, and there's a billion walleye being birthed down here. And we're sitting right here in the middle of it.
Right in the overflow.
Right.
We're in overflow parking, and there's nowhere to park in those other two
That's
places.
it. So, like, bring on the meat. And that's why, like, with walleye, it is what it is. Like, we could have more walleye fishermen. If you don't walleye fish. Saginaw Bay and Saginaw River are giving them away. 8 fish a person, 13 inches or bigger. Like, that's crazy.
Save a bass's life, eat a walleye.
Yeah, it's like, that we need t-shirts that say that.
Yeah.
Let us know below in the comments. Would you wear a t-shirt, save a bass, eat a walleye? Or are you sickos out there eating smallmouth? No, but on a real note, it is something like we need to. Are smallmouth spawning at the rate that walleye are right now? Are we going to have that number of fish? I don't think so, or we would know about it.
I mean, I'm still catching quite a few small fish, so that's like one thing that's like,
yes,
okay, hopefully these fish will get to maturity, and hopefully they'll become something. But like,
especially when they're eating the muskie and not the other way around.
Yeah, dude, that was crazy. But like everything's cyclical too. Like we're going in cycles, and I think St. Clair's honestly going down a little bit. And but the only thing is like when St. Clair went down before, Erie was on fire, and like everybody that was doing good, like Bassmasters, they were all running to Lake Erie.
Correct.
You know, like Aaron Martins and Shinfukai, all those guys, they would run from Metro all the way to Pelee Island. And they were bringing back really big fish into Lake St. Clair.
God, that's a run, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Holy.
Yep. Especially like with going through that Miracle Mile in the summertime in Detroit. Yeah. I could do the rest of it, 99% of it, but that 1 mile, like,
brutal.
Especially in a bass boat, like, I don't know.
That's always what cracked me up with the bass boats is like these guys are just flying across the water, and like our boats are meant to just like blow right through them, and they're just right across the top.
My back hurts just looking at them. Like, see all these old guys that have been running bass boats for 40 years, the boat ramp.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, dude. They're like, this Lake St. Clair's choppy. Like, this Lake St. Clair will sink your ass. You got to be careful.
Yep.
You got to be careful. But it'll be interesting to see, man. I mean, obviously, I've got a lot of hope and excitement that it's going to stay good and get better, but that's...
I mean, there's a lot of fish out there, don't get me wrong. It's still a world-class fishery.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Like, I'm sure next year the elites, those guys will still catch them, too, but...
If you want to catch one, www.lakestclairbass.com. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
We're full of them.
Check it out.
Nobody pays us, so we can shameless plug whatever we want.
Yeah.
But seriously, if you want to learn more about smallmouth, if you want to get out and catch more smallmouth, I don't even know how many days you've got open coming up this fall. It's obviously been a busy season, but it's worth giving Joe a call. You can get to his website, like I said, lakestclairbass.com. You can head over to Hook One Bait and Tackle's website and go to the Charters tab and his logo. If you just click on the logo, it'll take you to the website. But it time on the water is impossible to beat. It's a big reason why I wanted to sit down and go over that, like what you saw this summer and what you've been seeing, because being out there every day, like you said, you get them down to a pattern where you're basically feeding these guys like, hey, these ones aren't going to eat at this time of the day, but we'll come back here. We're going to have a better chance picking off some of these fish before we work back to that. And like that's extremely important.
Yeah, and there's days like if you leave them around alone and like don't move them around, don't put them in your live well, and you take care of them, they will bite multiple days in a row.
Oh yeah.
Like, there was one spot this year that I literally lived on all summer long. And it was literally from probably the end of June all the way through, like a couple weeks ago, they kind of all disappeared. But I know for a fact I was catching the same fish every single day.
Right.
And they bit every single day.
I had to explain. I had a guy call me the other day, and he wanted to do a charter, and he wanted to do like 8 guys, and it was just, it wasn't going to work. But he wanted to catch and keep the smallmouth. And he's like, man, everybody I call wants to know, or everyone I call won't keep the smallmouth. Like, why doesn't anyone want to keep them? And for us, it's a simple math equation. It's the same reason they don't catch and keep billfish down south. It's the same. I mean, tarpon aren't worth a damn to eat, but that's why they don't do it there. Those fish are worth so much more money when they're alive because they will literally bite every day. And so, like, if I was to go out and catch, 20 smallmouth and keep them and kill them, that's 20 more fish that I've got. Not that I want to sound lazy, but that's 20 more fish that I've got to go find that aren't there anymore. And now we've got to go hit other spots. It's just not fair to my other clients or the other guys that are paying to come fish.
Yeah. And like,
and they don't really, I don't mean to cut you off, but they don't really like the walleye reload.
Right. Because
there's a lot of them, but like the walleye reload, like every day, sometimes it's by the hour. You're catching new walleye. Like they're pushing through to new spots and it's because they're just migrating, constantly migrating. Where like those bass are held on said rock or they're held on this big weed patch because it's perfect for what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And everybody says there's so many fish in St. Clair, but like, especially with live scope now, like you put your live scope down and you can go out there and you can pan around and not see anything. So there's not.
I know you're like, is this thing working?
Exactly.
It's like, where are the weeds? Where is a rock? Where is anything? Where is any form of life?
Right. And like, if you're not seeing any life, you need to move. But like,
could we touch on that for a second? So, for maybe our viewers and listeners that aren't smallmouth fishermen, but they would want to go out and chase bass, what would you recommend to these guys? Like, obviously without doing like spot on the spot stuff, like what would you recommend to these guys to at least start to try and find some fish?
So right now, if you're going to go out from now until say the middle of October and you don't have a clue what's going on, like that's fine. Like when you start, it's normal. Like the best place to start would be around a pack of perch boats because there's going to be perch there. There's going to be emerald shiners there.
Yeah, I love that.
There's going to be smallmouth bass there, and there's going to be muskies there. There's going to be catfish there. There's going to be everything there. And you don't necessarily need to get right in the pack, but just kind of use your trolling motor and go around that pack of perch boats. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, a lot of the big smallmouth out there, too, they eat big perch. So,
oh, yeah.
I mean, that's
the perch is a game fish for some, and it's a bait fish for others.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So.
And what about like in the summer? Like what if someone wanted to go out like June, July? Weed beds, or do you recommend, channel edges or
so like
it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. It's not like we're trying to hide information. No, it is tough.
It all depends on like where you're at in the lake. And I would say earlier in the year, you're going to be looking for that grass that's just started growing.
Yep.
And that is going to change because that grass that just starts growing in say late June, it's going to grow to be 8 foot tall.
Yep.
Whereas there's going to be stuff that doesn't start growing until the middle of July. And like, as you go later into the summer, you're going to be looking for that stuff that's 6 to 8 inches tall.
Yeah.
Because there's going to, then that stuff that you caught them in late June is going to be so thick that there's no fish living in it anymore. So it kind of, for a rule of thumb for me is I'm looking for grass that is a foot to 2 feet tall, and you can see it on your 2D. You can see it on live scope. You don't have to have live scope to see that grass, and you just kind of want to find those smaller spots of like if you can find isolated patches of shorter grass that's inside. Like
side scan is a great tool for that sort of stuff, and most graphs now if you buy them, they've got side scan, and that's a great tool to find that difference in bottom.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I use my 2D a lot too when I'm looking for grass, and to double check to make sure it's not a bunch of fish, you can look at your down imaging. That down imaging will show you each stalk of grass, whereas like the 2D will kind of look more like clumps and like solid. you turn it on that down imaging, and you can see more of the defined bottom and the stalks of grass and how tall they are. So I really like the 2D and down imaging when I'm looking at grass. Don't get me wrong, if you know what you're looking at with side imaging, you could be dangerous, but it's not.
It's hard.
It's not obvious to me, anyways. You kind of have to put a little bit of time in with the side imaging to kind of know what you're looking. Like when you're looking at side imaging and rock, like that's obvious to me. Like hard stuff, like
Yes.
anybody can see that, but like the grass is not as obvious,
Right?
And especially with like stuff that's thicker and thinner and sand and patchy, and that's when I use like the 2D down imaging more, and you're gonna be, like I said, looking for that shorter stuff, and if you can find like a line of it, you can go right down that line and usually catch fish on the shorter grass side. So.
Well, and you made a great point too, like, you know, the information that we're giving and what we're talking about is it varies from different, like Lake St. Clair is not a giant lake by any means, but it is very different from one end to the other. I mean, Anchor Bay is very different from over by like Metro Park and Selfridge, which it basically runs into, which is way different than the Mile Roads, which is different than the South Shore, which is different than up on the Canadian side. Like, I mean, you could run across the lake and see 4 different colors of water.
And I mean, in the spring too, like spring to early summer, you can find 10-degree water temperature differences.
We did. Yeah. That one day we went out on a cold front in August, I want to say. We went out on a cold front in August and we slid up into Anchor Bay, and it was like 65 degrees to start the morning. Now it was going to warm up as the day went on, but it was 65 degrees in the morning. And by the end of the day, you know, not even really the end of the day, it was a half day. We ended up over on the northeast side of the lake over by Canada. It was 72 degrees, and the watercolor looked totally different. The bottom looked totally different. The fish were acting totally different. There was way more bait over at the last spots that we stopped. Like, the lake will change like that on you guys, and especially if you're fishing, you know, up where the channels dump in, that's going to be totally different, because that's one of the few spots where you can find those deep cuts that are leading out. You're not going to find that anywhere else. So understand that too when you're picking apart the lake and you're looking for that stuff. It's going to look totally different within, you know, a few miles. You can go 10 miles and be it totally different.
Yeah. And I mean, even like you can go a couple miles in some places.
Oh, yeah.
Totally different. Just it's a vast, huge lake, and it's like Pete said, very, very different. Like from Mitchell's Bay to Grosse Pointe, there's
yeah.
You wouldn't even think you're on the same lake in some spots.
No. If you were to like close your eyes and like whatever, I mean hypothetical, but if you were to like close your eyes and drop you in Mitchell's Bay and then drop you in Anchor Bay, you'd be like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then go drop you over like on the South Shore or something where there's a lot more structure. And then boom, all of a sudden you're in the shipping channel and it's 35 feet.
Yeah. And it's another thing, like it's really easy for us to kind of get stuck in our like same old ways and fish the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just so vast out there that there's enough water to go out and explore. And like if you're not catching them, like just go do something, go fish a spot you've never fished before.
Don't go in.
Yeah, just
don't go in. You're not gonna learn anything that way.
No, and don't just go out and try and poach other boats too. Like go like just look at your graph, and I don't know if this is for sure, but something that I've noticed this year, and so Lake St. Clair is very featureless. But on the chart, there's a lot of different 18, 21, 17, 21, 17, 20. And I think that when Lake St. Clair was charted, when these charts were charted, it was summertime. And I think those like shallower depths are the tops of the weeds.
You're not the only one to bring that up, and I think you're spot on.
So I think and that's another thing to check too. Like you can go out and like check those deeper spots and see if like the weeds are a little bit lower there, and like kind of try and get on. And those charts aren't like they're not pinpoint at all,
but they're close enough.
But exactly, like they will get you in the right area. So that's one other thing to take a look at. Like when you're looking at your chart, looking for a new place to go, if like in the morning you're catching them and the weeds were a foot tall, kind of look on your chart and go out there and look. And that's a good place to start, is in another area that has the same type of weeds.
So let's look forward a little bit, because that's some great information. But let's look forward, because we're going to have that transition soon. We've got fall coming up in 2.5, 3 weeks, the official start of fall. Obviously, we'll see what the weather does. But what are you looking forward to this fall, man? The smallmouth should start to get fat. They should start feeding quite a bit. What are we looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to fall, man. I mean, it's just something different. We're going to be going back to heavy line, bait casters, and stiff rods, and putting the fairy wands away for the winter, and kind of going out there and kind of fishing a little bit shallower, fishing more hard stuff, rock, wood, as opposed to in the summertime we fish a lot of sand and grass. So
yep.
We're gonna
a lot of those weeds are going to start dying off. You guys are going to start noticing if you're out there on the lake, if you're a troller, you're going to be miserable.
Oh, yeah. The eelgrass has already started dying.
It's crazy, dude.
That as soon as the days start getting shorter, that eelgrass, I mean, there's nothing to it. It's just a strip of grass.
Right.
You know? So, like, it's really easy for it to die and break off, especially when we have 40-mile-an-hour winds. That'll do it.
And pleasure boats galore.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those days start getting shorter. They get less sunlight. They start dying. But the fall should be really good. Right now is a really good time, guys, to get ready to start looking, like you said, in that shallower water. I mean, personally, I'm a flats guy. I love spending time up on the flats. A lot of fish are going to move up there, whether it's perch or walleye or smallmouth. I mean, the largemouth are basically there all year. But that's going to start getting really good, and these fish are going to start moving shallow again. And we'll see. Again, I think a lot of it has to do with weather, but at the end of the day, time of year is time of year.
Yeah, the weather is a major factor, and water temperature. And
oh, yeah.
As the colder it gets, the tighter these fish are going to school together. You know, like when in the summertime, and you might be fishing the same school of fish, and the fish could be a quarter mile apart. Whereas you get when the water's colder in the fall, those fish are a lot tighter, and you can spot lock. And when you're on them, dude, it can be like the best day of fishing of your entire life. And
do you change? I know you said you put away like the fairy wands and you start throwing out some heavier line and stuff like that. Is the fall for you more of like those crankbaits and those power fishing style baits, or are you still throwing drop shots? And
no, so I'll use like basically in the fall, like when you find one, you have found them all. And
I like that.
To find them, I like a swim bait. I like a crankbait. I like chatterbait if I'm up shallow enough. A spinner bait, something I can cover water with. And then once I get one bite, then I like to spot lock. I'm making long casts because I want to stay. Once I get bit, I want to be off of the fish. I don't want to get too close to them.
Yep.
So a lot of times with like the finesse stuff, I'm not making super long casts, but once I find one, that's when I'll kind of spot lock, be like, okay, I caught it on this line, pick up a tube or a jig, or I don't like to throw a drop shot that much because they're a little bit more aggressive and you don't have to use that lighter line.
Yep.
So I want to crack them and like just.
And it's fun, man. It's a change of pace. I mean, you've been throwing a drop shot for 100-something days. Yeah. Well, for 80-something days, you know what I mean? As soon as that post spawn kind of sets in, it's a lot of drop shot fishing, but it's the best way to stay up off those weeds and present that bait.
Yep.
So, and without having to try and think too much. You know, I think a lot of guys get in their head where they're in 15 foot of water, so they're throwing these super deep diving crankbaits and like, I keep getting weeds. Well, the weeds are coming up, 4 or 5 feet. So just downsize your crankbait or the diving depth of that crankbait a little bit, and you're going to have that success running over top of the weeds instead of right into the weeds.
Yeah, and like the smallmouth and largemouth are two completely different critters when it comes to cranking too. Like the smallmouth will come up to eat your crankbait.
Yes.
Whereas a largemouth, you need to be digging on the bottom. You need to hit something, deflect off something, and that's when the largemouth bite. Those smallmouth they're visual feeders. They're sight feeders. They will lock in on one and just track it and kill it and eat it.
Yep.
And you don't want any weeds on your bait. So And
they won't eat it. They're just too smart. They're too smart for that.
And another tool to know exactly where your crankbait is a live scope. You're not necessarily seeing the fish, but you know that your bait is running above the weeds.
Yep.
You know if your bait is getting in the weeds. You know what your bait's doing. Because I mean,
I've learned a lot more from live scope than I have caught fish. If that makes any sense. Like I've caught a lot of fish using live scope. But I've learned a lot more from it, whether it's how my baits are acting. I mean, I've learned a lot with how my baits are acting, which is like really surprising to me. Like, oh man, I thought I was running a lot deeper, and you're sitting up there in the top 6 foot of the water column. You're not going to get bit up. There's time, like especially out here in the river, like you're not going to get bit up there.
No, and like you can see like your Rapala DT10 dives to 10 foot. Well, when I've got it on 12-pound test on a long cast, it dives to 14 foot.
Right.
So, I mean...
Yeah, we talked about that the day we were out there. I was like, why are you downsizing that crankbait if it's deeper? And you're like, well, just watch. And it was like, oh, damn, I didn't realize. But there's a lot of variables, right? Like, and especially if you're throwing it on braid, it's going to be even different. Yep. And there's a lot to it. More than we can get into. What I will say, guys, is if you are interested, before we get out of here, if you are interested in learning more about bass fishing and you do want to go out there and target some of these world-class smallmouth that we have, Joe has a very good YouTube that he started putting time into. It's Joe Bauer Fishing. It's not going to be a bunch of those catch videos that you see all over YouTube where you're out there with the GoPro and just laying into 30 fish. A lot of it's in
5 days to film.
Yeah. Exactly. Wow. There's always that. There's always that. He's wearing different clothes. It's the same day. It's like, come on. But it's very information packed. It's typically Joe in the workshop. He's got his baits with him. He's got his baits behind him. There's been some really good episodes. There's been fishing reports. There's been how-tos. There's been why do this instead of this. So you've done a good job building that thing. There's really good information on there, guys. If you want to go check it out, it's tagged right here. And then you'll be able to find it down below in our bio. There'll be a link to Joe's YouTube. But you can check that out because there's just too much to touch on, man. I mean, we could do an episode every week for the next month, and we're still going to be missing information because – I mean, honestly, it's changing every day. That's why I like doing these like yearly or at least like spring and in the fall because we learn so much just in between that short amount of time.
Definitely. I've learned like in the last couple of years, I've learned more than I've learned in the last 8 years probably.
Yeah.
And it's like every year I just keep getting more and more knowledge.
Seems like it's almost exponential in the sense like, you learn a little bit and then that little bit leads to a little bit more and then that little bit leads to a little bit more. And by the time it's there, and I mean, shoot, dude, sometimes learning that information can kill you because you start overthinking it. But a lot of the times...
Now we're getting to the point where we learn a little bit and we know what to do with that information. Whereas before we figure something out a little bit, but then I don't know how to duplicate it.
Well, then there's a why.
Or I don't know where to duplicate it.
Yes.
Now I have got a lot more knowledge. Like I know if I'm getting bit doing this, I can run this in A, B, C, D, E different places.
It makes sense why a lot of these guys can break down water, like when they go to a new body of water. And I always think to myself, like, man, I remember some of our first podcasts with Louie. It was like, man, how do you go about breaking down all this water? Well, it's from learning a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here, and then piecing together that puzzle. I mean, it's the whole reason we all do it.
Yep.
So,
and that puzzle's fun. A lot of people like playing puzzle, including my wife. She loves puzzle. I hate puzzle. I want fish in my puzzles.
Yeah. Let me piece together the fish puzzle. A lot of times that puzzle beats me though, which I'm bad at normal puzzles anyway because I'm colorblind. So
you're fighting a losing battle, buddy.
It is what it is. It's an uphill climb. Is there anything else that you want to chime in or add?
Dude, I don't think so. Like, if you guys want to like touch on any topics, leave it down in the comments. Like, give us like a starting point for us to help you, help us help you.
Yeah. Like, we enjoy doing these. Yeah. Joe enjoys coming out and sitting in here and doing these, and especially now that we've got this, we'll get him on a day without work because this blonde was obviously pretty good. I've been out for a minute, but I don't need another glass until I eat. But seriously, help us help you because we love doing these. There's times where I'll do a topic that I don't think is going to be very good at all. And it ends up being some of our best topics. And there's other topics that I feel like we're going to knock out of the park.
And nobody gives a shit about.
Yeah, I'm like, what just happened? So seriously, guys, whatever you want to learn, and I don't care how specific it is. Yeah. If you guys want to learn how to tie a drop shot, how to fish a drop shot, and what baits to put on a drop shot and when, we'll do a whole drop shot video. We'll do a whole spinnerbait and chatterbait video. We'll do whatever you guys want to talk about. Crankbaits, like, believe me, it's stuff that we want to talk about. It's a big reason why we do it is to share this information, because at the end of the day, you're going to figure it out one way or another. So we'd rather have it be the right information. And especially here, like, the whole reason I started the podcast was to cut the learning curve. That was our whole point. That was our mission statement per se, was to help you guys cut the learning curve, because we're already out there figuring it out. Like, you know, we've got the time to kill per se, but it is what it is. So thank you guys for supporting, obviously, but seriously, let us know what you want. Comments are right below. If you don't want to put a comment out, you don't want it to be public, shoot us a message. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We've got an email, shophook1@gmail.com.
Our phone numbers are all over the internet.
Unfortunately.
Shoot us a text message, whatever you want. Like,
yeah.
We're looking for suggestions all the time.
We're here to help. If you want to find Joe, you can find him on social media at Joe Bauer Fishing. You can find him on YouTube at Joe Bauer Fishing. And you can find him online at LakeSt.ClairBass.com. You can book a trip. I can promise you guys that, what's it cost for a half day?
$350 for two guys.
What's it cost for a full day?
$550.
So for $550, because a half day you can only learn so much, but still $350 is a steal. For $550, you guys can have an amount of information that you'll carry for literally the rest of your life. Like, I can't explain that to enough guys. Like, you know, why would I pay a guide to go out and do what I can already do? Well, can you?
I've learned a lot.
Like, I don't want to be an asshole, but can you?
I've learned a lot of stuff from fishing with other people. Even like just getting in their boats, seeing how they do things.
Yes.
I have learned, even if I don't do exactly
even your clients,
what they're doing. Like,
even if he's 9 years old.
Yep.
That kid was a little wizard.
Dude.
Joe had a little wizard on his boat.
He has saved a bunch of fish's lives.
So, seriously, check him out online. While you're there supporting Joe, please, guys, support the people that support us. I always tell our guests, I mean, Joe's been a guest before, but I tell our guests all the time that we have some of the best viewers and listeners and supporters. I mean, that's what I'd like to call you guys, are supporters. We've got some of the best supporters out there. We don't have a bunch yet. It'd be great if you guys could share this video wherever you're seeing it. But support the people that are supporting us. Papa's Pilar Rum, they're awesome. They're great people to work with. They support conservation. Cortland Line, made right here in the United States. It's a very good master braid that we use. They've got all the fly lines. I'm not even going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. But I've used their master braid from 5 pounds to 100 pounds. They make really good stuff. It's made right here in the USA. Great Lakes Anglers Co. Captain Adam's going to be on one of our podcasts here coming up. I think I've got him coming on next week. He's going to talk a lot about conservation and supporting sport fishermen as opposed to fighting the battle with commercial fishermen. And it's just some coffee. It's just some coffee that's really good. It's kept me awake with a newborn. So they do a great job. And obviously Whitewater Fish, they do a really good job. They've been really big. They've been very involved with this. They love what we're doing. They love that we're trying to spread information the right way. So you can check them out as well. The discount codes will be here, probably taking up the whole screen. So if you guys want to save some money just to try it, you can. Shoot, man. Other than that, I don't think I've got anything. Joe, thanks, dude. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely, anytime.
Joe's going to be out there bright and early in the morning and probably for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be fishing through October. I've still got a few weekday days available in October. The rest of this month is pretty full, but to be totally honest with you, like, the fishing's going to be a little tough in September. So
yeah, October is going to be a good time to get on some good fish.
Big ones too. Like, that's the time of year, like, you don't collide with them every time, the big schools, but like, that's your time to catch your PBs. Like,
and then come November, it's it's our time to fish. We
Yeah.
pull out the trolling rods and we go walleye fishing, and we're going to do that all the way up until probably New Year's Eve if it allows.
Yeah, and it depends too. Like the first couple of weeks in November can be good if it's warm, and the smallmouth fishing can be outstanding. Then it all depends. It's all up to Mother Nature. It's all up to her now. Like I can't tell you when it's going to be good because.
Do you know when you can tell them? On your YouTube.
Yeah.
At Joe Bauer Fishing. After it happens.
Yeah, after. Like, do you wanna?
You're pretty up to date on them.
Do you want to read the report or do you want to make the report?
Ooh, be the report, you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're gonna see you next week on the Hook One Pod. Adios.